Hi, my name is Dave and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. And before we step back into my office and we go over some of the tools that I teach on how to get your athlete's mindset and mental toughness at a high level to perform at their peak, I just wanted to spend a minute with you kind of introducing myself and let you know a little bit about my story and what has driven me to reach out to as many people as I can to help young athletes with mindset and mental toughness. As an athlete myself, I always dreamed very big, and I care a lot about people, especially young people, and I've always valued the relationships in my life, and I've always wanted to make a positive impact, and that's why I have continued to coach once my playing career was over. Now, I was a goofy looking kid, 6'7". I was very skinny. I had acne. I got bullied and I got made fun of a lot. And because of that, I ended up putting a lot of my energy into sports. I worked my hardest at being the best athlete that I could. And eventually, I earned a college scholarship and became an All-American as a basketball player. Being an athlete taught me a lot. It's just about how important to prepare not only physically, but mentally. And there's so little focus on the mental aspects of sports preparation these days. And I realized that the mental aspect carries such an incredible weight, far more than anyone could ever see. And I even look back at my career, and even though I had a pretty successful basketball career, I could have even made that next step forward if I just would have had a little bit of mindset or mental toughness training. And it wasn't really till I went through a very personal struggle that I realized how absolutely critical the mental toughness and mindset game was. You see, after college, I became a business professional. And although I continued coaching, my new passion was in trying to run my business and trying to support my family. However, after a couple of years, a few bad business deals, and one of the worst recessions this country's ever seen, I literally lost everything. I was broke. I was declaring bankruptcy. I was trying to find a new career in a full-blown recession, and my thoughts in my mind started to go to very depressed states. I let outside factors control everything I was doing and everything that I was thinking. I couldn't comprehend in my head how this happened, and I couldn't find a way to get out of it. And I was slowly starting to sink into a depression, and my mindset started to shift into a very dangerous place where it controlled everything I did. And soon after, to make it even worse, I found myself in some legal trouble over my business. And I had to go watch my friends and former business partners all point the finger at me for something that I didn't even do. So not only was I dealing with the loss of a business, but now I was dealing with this issue. I had lost everything I owned. My business had failed, and I was in this incredible situation that I realized was just devastating me. Everything I once believed that was important, that I was capable of, that I could do, was now gone, and I was starting to question my abilities, and I was starting to let outside factors interfere with how I performed or how I interviewed for a job. I just started to feel worthless, and the word can't just kept coming up and kept coming up in my head. And I never realized how damaging it was to lose belief in myself and to let outside factors start to control my mindset and dictate my performance. So I needed to strengthen my mindset. I needed to get mentally tougher. So I remember what I did is I had made a decision. I stood up on the end of my bed after laying in bed there for a couple of days, and I just screamed at the top of my lungs. And I said, I'm not going to let this take me over. So I began to research just how powerful the mindset is, how beliefs are shaped, how failure contributes to everyday ways that we approach our life and the decisions we make. I started to look at how we let past events or past trauma or past failures really show up and haunt us in times when we need to perform. And I realized quickly that there is a way, there's actually a very powerful way, not to let you get held back anymore by these beliefs or these past events or what someone might have said. And I found a way to get more focused, more mentally tough, and have the proper mindset needed to succeed and push us to places we never thought we could go. I realized that these powerful tools can absolutely make a huge difference with young athletes, as there's so many outside forces, distractions, past experiences, and pressure that can really affect how a young athlete performs and what the toll of their mindset is in their field of play. So since my very personal struggle, it's been a very powerful journey. I began researching, I write, I started speaking and sharing my experiences and started coaching. I started advising others on beliefs and mindset, mental toughness, and how to reach their peak performance. I began working with professionals and entrepreneurs, amateur and professional athletes, and I really developed a system that has now helped countless individuals overcome certain mental blocks and really reach their peak performance. And one day I got asked who I absolutely loved helping the most. And my answer was simple. It was young athletes. You know, as a former athlete and as a current sports coach, I really understand what it takes to be successful in athletics, especially at the youth level. And a huge part of that is the mental game. So I made some very specific tweaks to my coaching program that I was doing with professionals and entrepreneurs and even some of the professional athletes. And I tweaked it to focus more and tailor it more to young athletes who were looking to reach their peak performance. And the results have been tremendous. I mean, working with these individuals, teams, the sports organizations, it's been awesome seeing the benefits that athletes who put the lessons I teach into place and watch how quickly they can turn around their performance on their field of play. One of the major tools I use, which I'm going to talk to you in a minute about when I get back to my office, is how to use an alter ego in sports. Basically, I call it a second I or a second self on basically you having and creating an individual who shows up on the field of play, who isn't haunted by the things maybe personally that you are. Say past events, there may be trauma, there may be doubts, there may be fear, other things like that. And I'm going to walk you through some of those steps when I get back to my office here in a minute. But I just wanted you to know a little bit about me, a little bit about what I do. And I really, again, appreciate you watching this video. And of course, there will be a contact page, which you can ask any questions. You can schedule some time to call, which I would love to speak with you about your specific issues for either your child or if you're an athlete yourself. And we'll just put it all together from there. So let's head back to the office and let's continue going on this ride. All right, sitting back down at the office here. So I've got my slideshow up and ready for you. Appreciate you taking the time again to watch the video to hopefully get some good tips on how to help your young athlete reach their peak performance. And that's the reason why I started the Confident Athlete. That you heard me as I was over at the softball field earlier, kind of just talking about myself and ultimately what took me down this path. And I absolutely love working with athletes. It's been a passion of mine for years, and it's something that I will continue to put all of my resources in. It really is a rewarding journey that I love taking. Each young athlete I work with has different circumstances they're dealing with, and it's just so awesome to see when they actually do make some adjustments and they start to realize into the mental game how important it is, and then they really start to improve and start to reach their peak performance as athletes. So again, thanks again, and let's move forward. So, you know, I get questions a lot about, well, what exactly is sports mental training? You know, I've heard of sports psychologists, which sounds like they're hired by professional teams and it's some kind of crazy long-term deal. But, you know, what it really is it just is kind of finding ways to strengthen and fine-tune the way that young athletes or athletes in general approach their game or their moments, that when they're supposed to be. It's not something that They change into some character or something, 24/7. It really is meant just for sport, the way that I train it. And a lot of times I get calls or I get feedback when I'm dealing with parents or when I'm even dealing with athletes and some professional athletes even that say things such as, hey, I train my rear end off, 4 or 5 hours a day, lift weights, I go in, I do all the stuff. But when it comes to performing, I feel like there's something holding me back. And the word I hear most is, it seems like it's all mental. And so they're just not really sure what's holding them back. And that's where I go in and kind of break down and kind of give them ideas on what it is that's holding them back, why that's holding them back, and more importantly, how to push it aside so it doesn't hold them back anymore. There's a massive importance on the mental side of sports preparation and being able to perform at your peak, but it's just so often neglected, especially at the college, high school, and middle school levels. So one of the things I do is I focus a lot on the mental focus, kind of healthy self-talk, visualization, work a little bit on routines and goal setting, but mostly I really work on overcoming fear and really overcome pressure that maybe the young athletes feel, doubt in themselves or doubt in their ability, and how to really step away from themselves into this character, and I'll talk more about that later, that really is built to perform at their peak level on their field of play. Now keep in mind, with our young athletes, there's a lot of pressure on them already that go far beyond sports. I mean, there's already all the sports pressures that come with what they're doing, right? Am I good enough? Am I big enough? Am I strong enough? All the other things that come into sports. But then take the weight of kind of the social pressures out there nowadays, with their friends, their teachers, maybe their schoolwork, parents, siblings. The list goes on and on and on about kind of the pressures that our young athletes face these days. And our focus is really to eliminate all of that and basically create in them the second self that I was talking about earlier, to overcome all that and step into their field of play as a highly confident, focused, and very ready to perform through their games, through their performances, through their competitions, each and every time they step out there. So let's talk a little bit about my technique. So the first thing I look at is a lot of kids, a lot of youth athletes, and even at the professional level, there's certain mental roadblocks they have. So this is kind of your ordinary athlete. There's past events or past failures that are weighing on them. I'm not going to take the last shot in the game because I've missed 2 and it's not for me to shoot that again. There's pressure on them that they feel they have to perform at certain levels, whether it's to be popular with their friends or at school, or to satisfy a parent's needs, or other things like that. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a ton of outside distractions. There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of emotion that comes into sports. The word "I can't do this" is all based on fear because of the fear of failure. And that's something that we work a lot on to overcome, is the doubt they may have in themselves and the lack of confidence that they may have on themselves. And oftentimes the reason for this is some things they don't even realize why. And as we start to kind of break through, and this usually happens on our first meeting we ever talk, the first time we ever talk, start to realize that, like I'll give you an example. I was working with a 16-year-old sophomore the other day who reflected back to a story in T-ball of why in big moments he is more nervous than he ever could even describe when he's playing the infield because of a T-ball incident, and how that affects his game here in high school, 10, 11 years later. So we start to look into that and realize why certain things are the way they are and why mentally they're having a hard time clearing all that out and it's enabling them to perform at their peak. And so we get through all of that. So let's talk a little bit about the difference of an ordinary athlete versus extraordinary athlete. And I'm talking about the mental game here. I'm not talking about, you're going to be the best athlete on the floor, the best player, this is really about the mental game I'm talking about. So an ordinary athlete that I work with every day to try to get them into the extraordinary category, they've got some past baggage. They feel that pressure. They feel the fear. They feel that they're limited. They are worried about what others may think of them. They're worried about their teammates and their coaches and the fans and all the feedback. They may feel they're too small, they're too big, they're too slow, they're not good enough, they're too weak, they're not experienced because they haven't played the sport long. They may think it's not my role necessarily to be the one that, should get the hit at the end of the game to win it, or should take the final shot at the buzzer. They don't want to disappoint anybody. The list goes on and on and on that creates the ordinary athlete. And then when you shift that over to the extraordinary young athlete, there's really just a couple of things. They don't carry any of that baggage. It doesn't exist in their minds when they're out there performing. And they have supreme confidence. They are not afraid anymore. They are not scared to fail. They are not worried about outside pressures and how they may look. That stuff all goes away when we convert them to the extraordinary side. So how do we become an extraordinary athlete? When it comes to the mental game and reaching our peak performance, well, like I said, we do realize what has been holding the athlete back. And it typically doesn't take very long. Typically it takes about 30 minutes of an open discussion to find out why they are being held back when it comes to the mental part of the game that they are in. We determine how we want to perform. So we've discovered what it is holding them back. Then we're going to talk to them about what it is on how they want to perform. And those things holding them back, what exactly is keeping them from performing how they want to. And then we become very clear about the intentions. Okay, we see this athlete, who we can be and who we want to be. We know it's deep inside of us. And now we're going to dig them out of there and find them. And we focus on the right actions. We understand the beliefs we have, and we change those. And then we plot a path from going from the ordinary athlete that we're performing at to the extraordinary athlete that we're going to perform at to reach our peak. Part of that process is really creating in ourselves who shows up to compete. What I do is I sit with young athletes. I've done it with professional athletes. I've done it with business professionals and entrepreneurs, and the list goes on and on. But we build a strong list of the attributes that the current person has, the current athlete has. That is good. On top of the bad ones, which we've set aside. And then we build additional characteristics that are needed from, say, a character that we create or someone that we have seen and admired, whether it be an athlete, whether it be a superhero, whether it be a public figure. We create those attributes needed in order for them to reach the best performance that they can put out there each and every time they compete. And what we do is we create that. You understand where I'm going with this? We're creating basically an alter ego for our competition. We're creating a second self or a secret identity that now that ordinary athlete that used to be going out there on their field of play is no longer going out there. We now have combined through a bit of a process that I work with, and it doesn't take long. It's actually just over a few short weeks that we've created now this new identity. And we give this new identity a name, we give it a focus, we give it who it is, and then that is who we take out in our field of play. And it's the second I call it. Another word for alter ego. That is who shows up and competes. Our alter ego, like I was mentioning, we create the traits that's needed to go out there, whether it's no fear. So we're looking at, I don't want to be afraid to make mistakes anymore when I compete. So we look at characters, for instance, in that person's life that may exuberate that trait. And we go through one by one all these traits. And what we do is we look at how their characters or their responds to adversity. And how would they respond if they fail? How would they respond if they succeed? How would they respond if they made a mistake or missed a shot or struck out at bat or finished third instead of second or first at the swim meet? Whatever it may be. How would that character respond? What would they do if they fail, and what would they do if they succeed? These are the things that we look at when we're building our second I that we're going to go into competition with. So let me tell you why the alter ego works in sports. First of all, human beings have been doing this forever. Now, one of the reasons that makes this system so successful for the younger athlete, and again, younger athlete meaning middle school, high school, and even college to a certain point. As kids, we always played games like this. We always imagined, right? We put on a Superman cape and we would jump off the coffee table and imagine we could fly. We've always built kind of alter egos, especially when we were young. There has been countless studies done. When you slip someone into an alter ego, they perform better. Okay? For instance, there was a study done, I believe it was from the University of Michigan, where they put they had children in to fit blocks into almost like a puzzle type scenario. And they sent one group in just in their regular clothes and, okay, go do this. They sent a second group in wearing doctor's coats and stethoscopes and all fitted in doctor's outfits, and explained to that group that they needed to go approach this like they were doctors, and doctors troubleshoot, and doctors, figure things out, and they're highly intelligent, and so on and so on. Anyway, long story short, the result was incredible. The group that just went in ordinary clothes as their ordinary selves really struggled with the exercise, started to get irritated with the exercise pretty quickly, started to face some adversity, and then it kind of discouraged them from everything. Whereas the group who went in as the doctor's coats, when they ran across adversity of finding where the blocks would go, they kind of took a step back and they thought about it and had to get and remain in their character, that believed that they were smart and doctors, and eventually figured the whole thing out in a much quicker time, and all of them did compared to the few that even sat out or quit on the other side. It really has an incredible effect on the mind. It removes the baggage and the mental blocks that have been holding young athletes back. It creates the true version of who the young athlete is. And that's what's so phenomenal about this, is this exercise and this platform. It's not a fake it till you make it type thing, because that's just destined to fail, because you always know in your heart you're faking. What this does is it actually creates and brings out the true version of who the young athlete is, right? Because we weren't born with the kind of baggage and fear of failure and all. We weren't born with that. We were that was conditioned into us as we grew up. And this is who we truly are. And we're creating who we truly are to step out in our field of play. It keeps young athletes focused. It keeps them fearless. It keeps them mentally tough, meaning when there is adversity. Because we know in sports there's a lot of failure. You strike out a bunch, you miss shots in basketball. Maybe you don't perform your best on that particular day for whatever the reason may be. There's a lot of failure in sports. And what this exercise does by being able to use our alter ego is it allows us to use the mental side of that, the mental toughness part of it. So failure doesn't necessarily haunt us anymore, because we're going to look at how this alter ego would cope with failure, and that's who we use. There's tons of examples in sports of people who have used alter egos. I mean, absolutely tons. First, Kobe Bryant. You're right. Everybody knows him as the Black Mamba. He even stated that that was his alter ego. He created it himself after going through some struggles. He created and looked for what it was in something, and he found a black mamba snake. You know, it's sharp, it's cutting edge, it's sleek, which are characters that he built that he would come out on the basketball court with. Justine Henin, tennis player, not afraid of anyone, but sometimes I'm afraid of myself. The mental part is very important. And the reason I use this quote is when she talks about being afraid of herself. See, that's one of those things we talk about on the ordinary side. The extraordinary athlete doesn't fear themselves because they are entering their field of play as a second self, someone with supreme confidence. Okay, the mental toughness aspect is just absolutely huge with this. You know, Vince Lombardi, the famous football coach, mental toughness is essential to success. And he couldn't be more true. And like I said, time and time again, I look at examples of why athletes aren't performing, especially young athletes at their peak. And it comes down to this. It comes down to the mental part of the game. And there's so little resources and so little help out there that like I said, I've really felt called into action to do this after helping professionals for a number of years and speaking on stages and helping coach individuals and adults and stuff like that overcome adversity. And as I started to work with some of my teams, I was like, boy, this is really a powerful thing that's not being used enough. And I want to make sure I can get out to everybody just how important it is. And most importantly, how quick it is that results are typically seen. This isn't like this isn't some type of long-term psychologist type thing where it's going to take years to create, this different person to how I perform. This really can happen in the very short term. And you can start to see impact immediately out there on the field of play. It's really awesome to watch, especially if the young athlete is struggling with kind of the mental game as is. So let's talk about the impact of the second I, or the alter ego that we're going to use with your young athlete. Like I said, it's not fake it till you make it. It really is finding the power inside of the young athlete and bringing that out through this method. It opens up the possibilities of more achievement and much more success on their field of play. It cuts out the bad emotions that young athletes carry. Doesn't let that hamper them and get them doubting and scared. It helps them deal with failure. Like I said, sports is filled with failure. But now we have a tool on how we actually can deal with it, so it doesn't haunt us the next time we go perform. It can help with all aspects of life. Whether it's in sports, whether it may be in another thing that they're struggling with. It really is a way to channel an alter ego that they may need for any moment. And it really does take the thinking out of things. In a lot of the studies I did, and especially with youth and the way the youth mind works, a lot of it required so much thinking. Like, okay, I want to change. So now I got to think about, that these reactions I'm feeling are just chemicals and the chemicals really aren't real. And I'm thinking about it, just makes them think. Instead of where this particular strategy removes that. And we've created a character that they now are that goes into that field of play. So all the thinking of distractions and how to get over this distraction and it's all gone because we've developed a character now and we already know how it handles. It's almost a reactionary thing. We don't have to think, and we don't have to, especially in our field of play, why am I feeling this and how to eliminate it? And by the time the performance of of the game has suffered tremendously because you've been trying to figure out what's going on. And again, you go home and it's just thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking, and it eliminates that. It just flat out eliminates that obstacle. So what do I do specifically? Well, I take a look at what currently holds back the athlete, the mental game, from being able to perform at their best ability. I look and I provide insights, and I start to give some tools and build this character I've been talking about from what the athlete will need to perform at their peak level. I identify why failure and these other obstacles that they feel have been holding them back, or that you may see as a parent in your young athlete, what might be holding them back, and we get rid of them. They just aren't a factor anymore. Of course, like I've been talking about almost this entire slideshow, is I help create the second I, or the alter ego that they're now going to go perform under. And it really is getting them fired up, focused, and confident when they can go approach the game in this manner. And I work on getting athletes to their peak performance, their peak potential. And I help young athletes realize the power of these practices can also be used outside of sports. There's nothing more satisfying when I get a call after working with somebody, 6, 7, 8 months later, or if I've spoke on a stage recently about the subject and someone reaches out to me, a year later to say, hey, I used what you taught me about creating this alter ego for my sport, and I used it in the way that I approach my relationships at home, or a particular class in school that I was struggling, or whatever it may be. And I get the same kind of feedback from adults. And, a quick story is I worked with a young kid I guess it would have been about a year ago now. And just last week, I got a call from the child's father saying that he used some of these techniques that I had shared with his kid in sports about his performance at work. And I had mentioned to him that I work with professionals a lot with these same type of strategies, and he was talking about the difference it made for him. So there's just nothing more rewarding than hearing that, and the strategy really does work. Again, it's been done since the beginning of mankind, really kind of using the imagination and the power of that. But what I've done, and through my research, reading, talking with everybody imaginable about different strategies like this, is really put a system together that really creates this in the way to use it in a healthy environment and use it in a way to reach the peak performance that your young athlete needs to get to. I would love a chance to talk with you. Give me 30 to 45 minutes of your time if you are an athlete or a young athlete or a parent of an athlete, and you got some of these concerns. Maybe you're seeing some signs that you're just being held back from performing at your peak. You just feel there's something mentally going on, whether it's confidence, whether it's fear of failure, there's other pressures, whatever it may be. And let's talk about some strategies over the course of this call to help get the best version of you out. And then after our discussion, we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about working one-on-one with me. My coaching program is not a long-term program at all. It's actually just a course over a few short weeks. And it really is known for creating quick, fast turnaround of clearing these mental blocks, creating the kind of mental toughness that you need to perform at your peak. And more importantly, going through the exercises of creating that second self who you're going to bring into competition so you don't have any of these blocks standing in your way. The button below is just to schedule. Again, there's no cost. It's 30 to 45 minutes. You will get something out of the call, solutions on how to overcome some of the blocks you have, tips on discovering, how to use the power of kind of an alter ego in your sport. You're going to get a realistic approach to rapid improvement in your mental game, and you will see it directly reflected in your performance. I promise you that. And then again, we'll talk about the possibility of working together over the course of the next few weeks to make sure that each time you step into competition, each time you step out into your field of play, you're out there and you know and you're confident that you're at your peak and you're going to perform at your peak. And any failure, any adversity that comes along the way isn't going to affect you like it may have in the past. It's going to be able to roll right off, and you're actually going to be able to grow and get stronger from it instead of it holding you back. So again, please click on the link below to schedule your call. There's no cost, there's no obligation, and we'll talk for a few minutes, kind of get to know each other a little bit, talk about some short-term solutions you can use. And if it makes sense for us to work together over the next few weeks, I hope I get an opportunity to do this. Like I said, my goal and my passion is really designed around young athletes. I absolutely love seeing the turnaround in them. I absolutely love seeing them get out there reaching their peak. And that is my goal, is to make sure young athletes are equipped with these kind of tools to take their game, to take their performances to the next level. I appreciate, again, you taking the time to go through this video. I look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you so much, and let's all get out there as athletes, especially young athletes, and reach our peak performance.